the Book of Gaub. It is a grimoire that is mostly system neutral, but it is best used together with an OSR system. So this has been published by Lost Pages, and this nice cloth-bound hardcover is the standard edition. In the Kickstarter there was a collector's edition, but the standard edition is already plenty nice. A finger trails the letters across a dusty tome. A finger points the way down a dark, haunted alley. A finger feels for the pulse of life on a long decayed corpse. A finger scratches the floorboards beneath your feet. A finger chewed down to a white bone. A finger that is not there. A finger catches a shed tear and slides it into a bottle. Those are the 7 fingers of the hand of Gulp. So Gulp is the theme for this spellbook, if you so will. There's a content warning right at the beginning. It's always good. What is Gulp? Gulp is like a malign entity that influences the world through dark magic and nightmares or something. It's not made quite clear. That's for the GM to decide after all. On my mind, it becomes like a great old one of the Cthulhu mythos, a being not quite of this realm that influences our mortal world through odd-angled corners and the words between pages. On its essence, this is a collection of spells that are roughly categorized by the 7 fingers of Gaub. So we have finger trailing the letters. These spells have to do with written words. Finger that points the way is about travel. Finger on the pulse is about medical body horror. The finger under the floorboards is about haunted houses. The finger gnawed to the bone is again body horror and gluttony. The finger that is not there is about missing and wrong memories. And the finger catching a tear is about manipulation of emotions. We've also got Paraphernalia, which are magic items that are themed to the hand of Gaub. Number of magic catastrophes and monsters of Gaub. Finally, adventure hooks and rules for sorcery. Let's get into it. I've marked some example spells that I found especially interesting. The finger trailing the letters has something to do with written words, in this case more like a library. The spell Obasceration. Every spell starts with a very short prose, short story. Here it says, Professor Barritz took great pride in his lectures. Took it quite personally when week after week the back row of students continued to whisper and chat all through his lessons. After one sleepless weekend in his study, finally came up with a concentration aid for his dear pupils. What this spell does. Obviously it has a spell component. Hold up needle and thread made from a drawing pin and old bookbinding material. Needle and thread will fly from your hand towards the victim. The victim must save to avoid getting their mouth stitched. The process is painful and the victim is silenced until the stitches are removed. So, also an illustration here. So the effect is a silence. spell, but this is just so much more flavorful and also horrible. And this is usually the theme with any of these spells. Also, you don't have to worry too much about them being too weak or too powerful, because many of these spells are very specific, have a very specific use case. And with many of these short prose and spells, I already get ideas for NPCs, locations, and potential plot hooks. Next spell in The Finger That Points the Way. There's a short poem here. The road that twists, the road that winds, the road that bites, the road that binds, the road that turns throughout the wood, the road that skirts the neighborhood, the road we prayed we'd never take. We walked that road one winter's day and found that we were whisked away. Now, this spell transports you to any location you wish to go, but you have to travel through 24 miles of magical shifting landscape, and you've got a random table where you're going through. So this is a quick travel spell. This is similar to a teleportation spell, but it is so much more flavorful. And traveling through these magical locations can be an adventure in and of itself. Still, in game terms, it will be much quicker than taking the mundane way, but there's risk involved with it, there's mystery involved with it, and you don't quite know how it will work, how it will happen. So this is so much more flavorful than just a teleportation spell. Disarcinate. When the good doctor first answered the call of Mr. Gabriel, we had arrived at his home to find his body lying statue-like in his rocking chair. He was thoroughly ancient by appearance, though his file had said that he was 34 years of age. I confirmed his pulse, fearing he was deceased, when I felt a sickening chill upon my back. Only barely made out a bright flash of light, when suddenly Mr. Gabriel's pulse had started up again, and he was miraculously awake. I can only assume it was the amazing work of the good doctor, as we weren't called to that home for many weeks after. The spell detaches your soul from your body, making it manifest as a shadow while the spell lasts. Then you can travel around, and then you can attempt to possess a nearby creature, forcefully ejecting that creature's soul and taking over the body. And I can already see your big, evil, dark magic bad guy using this spell to escape the prosecution of the heroes. And once the wizard has swapped bodies, they will have to find out all over again where it is, and it will of course be the creepy little girl. Ambolobula. So these spell names, they are not as flavorful as a longer name could be, like the unending corridor of Ambulobola. But these names are already quite flavorful. And this name is a lot better than calling it Infinite Corridor or Spectral Prison or something. Each morning is the same. I wake from my empty bed and walk down my empty hall. I step into an empty world and go to my empty job. I return and walk down my empty hall, fall into my empty bed. Each day feels longer and emptier. The walk to and from my bed fills my empty life. One day it will fill everything. So this spell basically traps people into an infinite corridor, and the corridor will warp and have steps and corners obscuring its infinite nature. And if you elaborate on that concept, you get something like infinite train. And the PCs can be trapped in an infinite labyrinth of strange magic, trying to find their way out and then track down the little girl that houses the soul of a century-old dark wizard that has trapped them in there as revenge for thwarting his plans. This is quite long, I'm not reading that, but this here spell, Fractal Flensing. Any damage the target takes is mirrored upon their aggressors. The target still takes damage, but that damage is then also averaged out between all nearby hostile creatures and dealt to them. Any deliberate attacks are mirrored on the individual who made the attacks. Whoever strikes the fatal blow must save or die, as though they too had taken the same blow, making the save still leave the attacker horribly scarred. So, once you've tracked down the little girl, it is actually not that hard to kill it in open combat, but whoever strikes the killing blow will probably not make it, and thus when at an impasse. And let's see how the PCs get out of that. Arbitrate memories. I cannot deny the memory of the crime. Recall it in perfect clarity. The break-in. Then, in the final fleeting moments, I see my face looking shocked, and hands that are not mine reach out to grab me close and whisper something into my ear. Then I am awake, at the scene of the crime. How did I get there? Why did I do it? Confession of a Doyle convicted. This spell swaps memories with someone against their will. Whisper a number of your memories up to your level into the ear of the victim and draw out an equal number of their own of your choosing. If the victim fails to save, those memories are swapped. It can only be returned through magic, or if either you or the victim are killed. Now imagine this as an opener for a murder mystery. An NPC or one of the PCs thinks they've done it, but there's actually a lot of reasons why they wouldn't have done it. And then they have tracked down the real killer who can't even remember that they did it. Or the other way around. Philodicate. As Johnny led against the tree with the big, sharp shovel stuck between his ribs, he sputtered out to Nellie. Now look what happened to me. Man, Pops always said I should be more careful with the tools. Nellie stared at him in horrified disbelief, revolver smoking in her hand and blood splattering onto the poppy rose's dress. Their father's brains were a big mosaic round the bullet hole in his skinning shed. The chimes, made of their mother, whistled inside as the wind blew through the open door. He did this to you, Johnny, Nanny sobbed. Why don't you remember? Johnny laughed, though it was more like a wheeze. He had a beard of red foam. Before he died, he said, "You're silly. Pops wouldn't lay a finger on me." The victim of this spell must save or be compelled to disbelieve that the subject you choose, which can be you, could harm them. The victim's mind will come up with exceedingly strange explanations for any torment inflicted upon them by the subject, deflecting the blame to another source. And you could come up with a pretty dark horror story. Just elaborate on this short story, the fate of Johnny and Nellie and their mother and their sadistic, probably crazy dark magic father. And what had he been skinning in his skinning shed? We've gone to Paraphernalia, For each finger we've got a number of 7 themed paraphernalia. These are magic items that are not necessarily powerful, but very flavorful, can be a good plot device, and in the right hands at the right time, they can be very useful. A blindfold made out of rawhide. Wearing it blocks sight, but you will see living creatures as phantom outlines. If empowered, you can perceive living creatures through 10 feet per level of non-living material. So empowering means you spend spell levels to pour some magic into the items, making their true effect. So this blindfold, it's basically a detect life spell, but this is so much more awkward. But in the right circumstances, yeah, can be very useful. Maybe you're searching for an abducted victim that has been entombed in some cemetery, and now you have to find out in which fresh grave it is, and you only have time to dig up one grave, so you don this rawhide blindfold. You can see the life energies through the soil. In the right circumstances, even a very odd item can become useful. Magical catastrophes. So depending on your system, if you're fumbling your magic, if you're stressing your spell casting, if you're not a spellcaster at all, if you don't know the spell, if you're out of spell slots, you can still try to cast the spell, but you might get a catastrophe. These are once again sorted by finger, but it's also a D100 table you could roll on if you wanted to. Half of the catastrophes are general, that are not catastrophes of a specific finger, but of Gaub in general. Pick some at random. The sorcerer has suddenly realized that they are being followed. Every night, for the next 7 nights, the feeling intensifies. An increasingly thick fog rolls in. On the 7th night, an immortal 10-meter tall skeleton chases the sorcerer on silent feet and will wring their neck if it catches them before dawn. The feeling, the fog, and the skeleton vanish on the dawn of the 7th day. Once again, very strange, creepy, flavorful catastrophes. Love it. Monsters of Gaub. Many of these are not actually that dangerous, but they make up for that in being super strange. And besides from their basic stat and what they do, we have their wants, what do they want, their means, how do they achieve their wants, and the omens. So what hints can you find that this monster is there? What tracks does it leave? For example, this one, creatures dead of severe wounds, apparently self-inflicted. Wedge-shaped patches torn from rust, mold, grime, dust. Sounds of whispering and skittering limbs. So just using this for your Monster of the Week horror game, you have a lot of stuff to work with. Also, for each of these, they give you a use for the monster, for the rest of the monster, to make something useful out of it, like any good dark sorcerer would do. For example, this one, a careful hand can capture a wedge without harming it. Then bind it in a splayed position on a small wheel. This wheel is then worn over the chest like a large grisly amulet. The wearer must be careful not to harm it, and some are known to even tickle or massage the wedge to receive a reflection of the queening thing's pleasure. While worn, the wedge has a 50% chance of taking any damage intended for its wearer. Then reflecting it back upon the attacker. So this becomes a very powerful protective item if you want to walk around with a wretch stretched on a wheel on your chest. And all the monsters are like this, very monstrous. And if all of this was not enough inspiration for NPCs and adventure hooks already, they also give you a number of adventure hooks. Let's see a short one I can read out. Lost Love. A young woman approaches the party with a problem and ready coin to encourage them to investigate and intervene on her behalf. Although he was formerly devoted to her in an almost slavish way, her betrothed has broken off their engagement, claiming that he feels hollow within his chest where his love for her used to reside. The woman suspects that he has fallen under a magic spell, or has been bewitched. She is, in fact, correct. The man is victim of the spell Popolot, who sent their foul vermin to drain away his ardent romantic yearnings. What is the lover spurned by the young woman in favor of the spell's victim? Was it cast by a family member who disapproves of their union, or by a bitter-hearted shrew who hates love as an ideal? Got a number of these to work with. Well, we've got some very brief rules for sorcery, how you can use it in a levelless spell slot system or in a leveled spell slot system, spell duration and spell catastrophe. Then finally we've got an index and the afterword. This is the Book of Gaub. Now this does two things very well, I think. For one, it makes the magic spells magical. In my mind, to differentiate a magic spell from just a weapon or a tool, it has to be strange and you don't quite understand how it really works. If you would understand how it works, it wouldn't be magic, it would be science. For example, we humans used to think that lightning was thrown by Thor and his mighty hammer Mjolnir. Or if someone was struck by lightning, he was cast down by God himself. And nowadays we know how electric charge works and how thunderstorms work, and it's just a natural phenomenon explained through science. On that note, we still don't understand what dark matter and dark energy really are. That's why I use those two as the basis for the magic system in my own setting. Second, a spell should be flavorful. You don't just give the spell description, but also make it look and appear, let's say, interesting. Let's take a very basic D&D spell, for example, Magic Missile. Shoots 3 projectiles that do 1d4 damage each, and you can direct them at any target they hit automatically. Very basic first level spell, but it's a bit boring. Now if you were to give it a bit more flavor, like incantation to summon swarm of murder hornets, and that spell, it opens a portal into a dimension of murder hornets. 3 hornets come out to strike your targets at will, dealing 1d4 damage each. at higher levels, more hornets will come from this dimension. So exactly the same effect, but now you're summoning hornets from a dimension of murder hornets. It's a lot more flavorful and interesting than just plain old magic missiles. And then finally, what you can do, and what this book is great at, you can give your spells a theme. The Book of Gaub actually has 7 themes, each one for each finger, and the overlying theme would be dark magic and creepy stuff. But you could do a completely different theme depending on the source of the magic. So take a warlock, for example. They get their spells from their patron. And if that is the great Cthulhu, the spells could have something to do with mutation, the depth of the ocean, fish and tentacles. If it is something like a fairy queen, it would be more nature themed, more have to do with plants and fungi and insects. And then the murder hornets would be very good. Or a side effect of your spells are butterflies, rose petals or something. So yeah, to make spells interesting, they have to be a bit out there, strange, so they're not completely understood. They have to be flavorful, and they have to be thematic. And I think the Book of Gaub is doing all of that pretty well. And more than that, with the short prose in here, there are so many adventure hooks. So much for a GM to work with. So, question to you, dear viewers. What is your favorite spell? I'd love to read your most flavorful spell description in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching and goodbye.